And it's like, they don't even recognize they're being abused half the time. They think they're the problem. They think they're lucky to be with this man because they're so horrible. He has abused them mentally to the point they think they're terrible people who deserve the worst.
Today's conversation is one that I have been wanting to have for so long because this is exhausting, this narrative that women are just making up abuse and we're doing it to profit or harm men and we gain something from it as if there's some massive benefit, right? We're doing it for attention or money or just to ruin a man's life. And I need someone to explain to me where the hell the benefits are because I don't see them. So with me today, I have Reagan, who is host of Buckle Up Babes podcast. And you can find her on social media under that same name. And her content is absolutely amazing. So Reagan, I want to kind of turn this over to you and have you introduce yourself. Tell our audience a little bit about who you are.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here. Big fan. I started doing content long ago. I had a page that was very much about like narcissism way back when. And then I started focusing on a unique type of abusive guy, which is the nice guy. And the more that I talked about that, I just kind of found this niche fixation on like breaking down the ways in which we see men abuse women, manipulate women, the personas they put on, the less obvious forms of abuse and manipulation, the like benevolent misogyny. And now I talk a lot about celebrities doing that because what better way than someone in the public eye to showcase these behaviors and what it looks like and how it affects people. So that's a lot of what I do. I talk about all kinds of things, but it seems like I come back to that topic quite often. So
yeah, which makes sense because there's a lot to say on this topic.
Yes.
Yeah. So what inspired me to really want to talk about this was a clip that I saw in this Diddy documentary, right? And it was one of the victims talking about how people treated her like there was something to be gained from saying that she had been abused by him and that she felt like her whole life had been destroyed. And it really made me kind of sit in this and go, you know, this is a very common narrative, right? That women are just making it up to gain something. And as a victim of abuse myself, as a previous victim, I'm like, where's the benefit? I don't think I understand. And I thought about this and it's something that I wanted to talk about because so many women are accused of this and we see this narrative is just like friggin' everywhere, particularly when the perpetrator or the accused perpetrator is a nice guy or a guy that everybody knows. And we could talk about celebrities, we could talk about regular guys. Right. Who cares, right? What is this payoff that people keep... Exactly. What is this payoff that people keep talking about?
It's made up. It doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting because, you know, since the dawn of time, when women come out with accusations, men will claim that they're getting something out of it. They're liars. They want money. They want acclaim. They want payback. They're jealous. They're this, that, and the other thing. And we just see it like mainstream with public figures because everyone just accepts like, okay, well, they do have money, probably. So it must be that. It's gotta be that these women want money rather than the obvious truth, which would be, you know, these men have power. These men have connections. These men can ruin lives. And additionally, they have, you know, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of fans that are going to publicly attack this woman. And this woman is going to be ostracized. So, you know, I think the more likely case would be that women would not come forward and in order to not receive something negative, would just stay silent rather than would be benefiting from being vocal.
Yeah. And you know, so in my comment sections, I see sometimes women say like, name perpetrators, and then they put their abuser's name. And listen, like, I'm not crapping on women who do that. Do you, girl? But number one, it can be unsafe to do that because abusive men really have this issue with being called out. They kind of hate it. But also you can get sued for defamation. It's just, I don't fault women who do it and I don't fault women who don't. Because even the concept of like pursuing charges, I'm all for doing that, me personally. But I wouldn't say you need to because it's exhausting and it's not my reputation that's being dragged through the mud. It's yours. So you get to decide that for yourself.
I also agree, like if people want to name their, like I'm all for that as well. But there is the issue of it's not whether or not they did it, it's whether or not you can prove it. And that's the scary part. We see cases for like Diddy, for example, we have videotapes of him assaulting Cassie and like it went untouched and untalked about for a long, long time. And it's like, even if you absolutely know that it happened to you, it's nearly impossible to prove half the time. And so it's like, it's hard to come forward. You can get into more trouble accusing someone than actually the person who did the harm. Even if they're found, like even if people believe they did it. Like there was I forget the details of the case. I believe it was in the military, but this guy assaulted this woman and she recorded it on her phone. She recorded while it was happening and she got in more trouble for recording than
I
he
heard
did
about
for
this.
the assault.
Yeah.
So that's the reality.
That's maddening though too. I mean, honestly, and it's not like that's an uncommon thing, maybe that specific with those specific details, but it's not uncommon for the victim of abuse to have worse consequences than the actual perpetrator. It's wild that even with video evidence, nothing seems to matter. This idea that there's, whatever, women get attention or money, sympathy. I don't know. I came forward with abuse allegations and I know it was true because I was there. I no longer care if other people believe it. I was there and that's all the evidence I personally need. But thinking that I'm gaining something from it, and I even remember like when I started on TikTok, it was like, oh, you have all these followers. Exactly what is it that you think followers have to do with me? Like I get attention. I need attention so badly that I'm willing to make something up that never happened to me. It's crazy.
It just doesn't make any sense. There are so many other ways to get attention, and it really downplays what women go through when they out people. I mean, even if you're not naming people, you feel shame, you feel guilt, people don't believe you. Like, I feel so much empathy for people who have to come out about public figures because I think about in my life, in the lives of my friends, outing normal everyday men where the friends were like, that didn't happen, or he's really a nice guy, or I couldn't see that. He's never done that to me. And then you do it like it's gaslighting on a grand scale of all these people being like, either we don't believe you, or like you look at the case of Chris Brown, for example. We know he beat Rihanna. There's literally photos. There's the police report. He doesn't deny it. He does not deny that he did that. I mean, you can look at the photos online to this day, and it's like people just go, well, I don't care. I don't care about that woman. I don't. And that is horrifying. And so, like, when people are so readily wanting to believe there's some benefit, it's like, look at the negatives. Like, look at how bad it can be for the women. And like, it's not just that people don't believe their stories, like they're degraded. It's horrific.
Yes. Not being believed would be one thing, and that sucks when you're telling the truth. But I think that the response being, in fact, really to play on what these men say, right? Oh, she just wants attention. Great. So the attention that we get is she's a liar. She made it up. She's money hungry. She's trying to get custody of the kids. She this, she that. Why did she stay? What the hell is wrong with her? I would never let a man treat me like that. That's the attention that she gets. It's nothing but negative, awful attention. And for women who are coming out against a celebrity, they basically want to just go into a hole and pretend they never even made the allegation sometimes. And many of these women don't. I mean, you look at even the whole Epstein thing, which is obviously probably a whole episode on its own. But these women, at first, I know some came forward and some didn't, but I'm saying he was rich and powerful. Coming forward, for what reason? Criminal courts tend not to hold people accountable. And listen, I know you're not a lawyer, but why do you think some women pursue civil instead of criminal?
I sometimes feel like the burdens are a little bit different on what you have to prove. I think some people have better luck in civil versus, and like, if we're being honest, like the actual justice system doesn't do much. Like it really doesn't do much. Sometimes they can get at least something in the civil courts because it's so often women don't get justice. Women get like there was just that guy who literally like he had the syringe in Hawaii. That doctor had the syringe, beat her with a rock, tried to push her off a cliff. And he just said, well, no, she attacked me and she had an emotional affair and he got manslaughter. Like he tried to kill her. Like,
As he planned out murdering his wife and he gets manslaughter.
and the main factor from everything I've seen was just that she had a quote emotional affair. That's like the big thing. That's the big reasoning. And it's like, that's how we see women. It's like so often in the justice system, we're looking for an excuse for why men do what they do. And like, it works. There's a reason that women don't come forward, especially when it comes to like the justice system, because they're on trial. Everything they've ever done is on trial. Well, who did you sleep with? And why didn't you know when he went on a date with you, didn't you know that he was going to do something? It's like, you shouldn't think anything bad of men up until they assault you, harm you, hurt you. And then the moment that they've done so, the narrative becomes, well, how did you not know better? What were you thinking was going to happen? And so I think women do what they can in bad situations because it's just such a horrific system. And like, yeah, I've seen women absolutely torn apart when in testimony, and it has nothing even to do with the assault. It has to do with their character, and it's insane. As if women should deserve to be assaulted. That there's something they could do where it would be okay.
What did she do to deserve it on the largest scale possible, especially when it's a celebrity issue or anything that really makes the news? I mean, truthfully, this woman who had the needle and the rock and all that, like, she's not a celebrity by any means,
Right.
but it's a high profile case because it's crazy and yet not uncommon that a man does something to try to hurt his wife and everybody's answer is like, okay, but men don't just bash their wives with rocks for no reason. What happened before that? And the truth is, let's say she had an emotional affair. Let's say she did. I don't really understand. Are you saying that the natural consequence of cheating on a man, which is not a good thing, I'm not condoning cheating, but the natural consequence is murder, violence? Why? Are
Death
men
sentence?
inherently violent? It's crazy. So women who come forward, they are criticized in her sexual history, her relationships, her text, everything, family, friends, questioning her motives. And as you pointed out, it is always her reputation that's on trial. So even like the accusation itself, you put it out there and then they use that against you, that becomes the punishment that you're getting for even speaking. So when women say, I don't want to come forward or there's no point, I get it. I don't advocate for that because I once had a victim advocate rep say to me, you must feel like nothing but a drop in the bucket after finding out that my own perpetrator would not really be held accountable in any way in criminal court. And I said to her, I'm okay with being a drop in the bucket as long as I'm one drop and she's one drop and she's one drop and one day that damn bucket will overflow. I will be the drop. But if I'm a drop on the outside of the bucket and it's just nothing and this means nothing, I can't take that. As long as we're all moving towards something, which is crazy in its own way because to have to do all this work just to be believed when there's evidence, it's crazy to me. It's wild. But there's this belief, right, that celebrities, okay, those women want money. What about the women who are just everyday women, right? He's not wealthy or not publicly seen as anything. But it still becomes an issue because by no means I am and was nobody at the time of what happened to me. And yet I was still accused of making it up to gain something.
I think there's often a misconception that like people don't know. Like I don't think always the people around these men don't know the gravity of what these men are doing, but a lot of them do know they have some shitty behaviors. They have seen them be shitty to women in some way. And like, they make excuses for these men before we ever get here. Like whether that's their guy friends who say, oh, he just drunk. Oh, he just gets like that. Oh, that was one time. Oh, she just really made him mad. She was just a bitch. Or their family members. A lot of times it's their mothers that are like, oh, my precious baby boy, he would never do that. You pushed him. You must have done something. So I think it's hard because even if you come forward, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be met with, oh my God, I had no idea. I immediately, let me jump on that. Let me stop being friends with this person. Let me go with you. Let me help you. That is often not the case. It is often like they're aware of it, they're excusing it, or they're aware of it like deep down and they don't want to address it. And so if they can't address how their person they love is bad, then you have to be bad. That's the only out for them is to villainize you in order to keep their perception of this person in their life whole. And unfortunately, a lot of people are willing to sacrifice a woman in order to do that, to keep the peace within their own minds about the people they've chosen to surround themselves with. Because who are you if you choose to hang out with someone who assaults women?
Right. So they just can't possibly believe that, which is crazy to me. In my own experience, there was a few people that were kind of like, really? Like, that's shocking. Now, I think I was one of the lucky ones, perhaps, because the amount of people, men and women, and interestingly, I don't mean my friends. My friends believed me. I'm talking his circle, his friends, men and women were like, I'm not surprised. And it was so validating for me, but I know that's not most people's experience.
Right.
And I know my own experience going public with what happened to me. And again, not naming names, but going public with it, it was just constantly like, but you this, but you that. And interestingly, this whole custody piece, which, is a small part of the conversation, but she will get custody if she says it's abuse. It's actually called the silver bullet. And I've heard lawyers talk about it, but interestingly and unironically, always it's men's rights lawyers that use that phrase. But what studies actually show is that a woman who alleges abuse with or without proof, a woman who alleges abuse in family court is significantly less likely to get the custody that she asked for. And I say proof of that is in how many women report being told not to disclose abuse in court. And I was. Do not disclose that. It's too historical. It's not relevant. Don't make that the whole basis of your case. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? So if women are provably losing custody when they say it, and men who have committed abuse are actually more likely to get custody, I don't understand. Men who ask for custody, if they actually pursue it, they are likely to get what they ask for. Whether or not there's proven abuse or alleged abuse, it doesn't even matter. So it's a wild concept to me that it's like they're doing it for custody, they're doing it for money. You don't gain anything. You don't gain any custody. You don't gain money. If I prove abuse and I was getting divorced, it's not like I get more. I don't get more than 50%. That's not how it works. The downside is just endless to me. And I don't know why, other than just sheer misogyny, why anyone would think that.
I mean, I think it is. I just think it is true. I think it's misogyny. I think it's a narrative that has been so heavily thrown into society. It's been said so many times. I mean, there's the whole narrative of the fathers who are screaming, she won't let me see my kids, that whole thing. And I really want to, and it's more often than not, the case is he's not showing up or he's coming whenever he wants. And but people believe that so readily. It's something that I feel like we've just kind of accepted. I think there's such a misogynistic lens that we've been taught to look at the world through. And, even when we look at the courtrooms, what happens there a lot of times, the dynamic at play is the man who is, if he is abusive, will stay calm because he abuses women. So he doesn't have empathy for them, and he likes to see them suffer usually. And the woman who brings up the abuse is then in a heightened state because she's talking about being abused. And then she's looked at as being emotional. She's looked at as being hysterical. And you see that happen a lot in courts where it's just because she's talking about this horrific thing that's happened to her with emotion, as one would tend to do, and the man doesn't care, doesn't have empathy, and doesn't show emotion, the courts will look at the man as the stable one. And it's it's just horrific to see the way that I feel like it's the same narrative as, well, all men are logical and women are emotional. It's a lot of times men are detached. They are unempathetic. And so they don't have emotion in certain situations. And women are seen as emotional when really it is an appropriate response. It is appropriate to be very emotional when talking about abuse. And it's just sad to see the way it's weaponized in courts. And I've heard the same thing of women being told, don't talk about it. Because it's isn't this the appropriate time? Isn't this when I should talk about it? And no, it's because of how messed up the courts are.
Yeah. But don't talk about it on social media because that's defamation. And don't talk about it in family court because that's not relevant. And if you bring it up in civil court, you're a gold digger. And if you bring it up in criminal court, you can't prove it. So
yeah, don't bring it up, period.
Just
that's
shut
what
your
it
mouth,
ends up
girl.
being. Yeah, that's what it is. That's what you start to realize there's never right time. This, what I think about all the time with abusive men in Hollywood or musicians, whatever. It'll be nobody talks about it when they're alive, and then they die, and they're How dare you talk about that person? They're dead. How dare you? It's like,
Yes.
so when is it appropriate? If you can't talk
Never.
about when they're alive and when they're dead, so just never talk about abusive men. Is that what we're saying? Because that's the
Which,
message women get.
yes. And you know what the irony in that is? Does that not feel exactly like being in an abusive relationship? Like you have a problem with your abuser and you bring it up to him. You're like, hey, it really hurt my feelings when God, I just got home from work. You're going to jump down my throat the second I walked home. Can't you wait until I've like relaxed? So you're like, okay, we'll talk on Saturday. My God, that was 5 days ago. You're still on that. So there's no appropriate time to bring it up. So shut up is the answer. When you're in it, shut up. When it's happened to you, shut up. When you're dead, shut up. All of it. So it's like, God, there's no possible time that is appropriate to bring it up because the world just wants you to be quiet. And there's 1,000 methods to make her quiet. So again, why bring it up at all? Now, I'm not advocating for women to not bring it up.
Right.
I think we need to get louder. In fact, I think we are too quiet. This episode is really like meant to advocate, keep talking. There's a million ways to silence you. Be louder than all that crap. Now, something I find honestly fascinating is, let's say a man robs a bank. And obviously he's going to plan out the robbing of the bank. He's going to try to get away with it because, jail sucks, right? He's going to do things to hide the crime, create an alibi, wear a mask, all the things, right? We can agree that any person committing a crime would, in theory, do their best to hide that, yes?
Right.
Why wouldn't a perpetrator of abuse do the exact same thing? Why do people go like, but I didn't see it, but I don't know. Yeah, I didn't see the guy rob the bank either, but there's still some evidence that demonstrates it. We have enough.
He
We don't
had the
always
gold.
have to have
He had the
footage.
cash.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
we found him with the gold. It's
Right.
not just somebody said he did. And I think even too, like, as much as we can understand that and it makes sense, somehow when it's abuse, it's just, no, we're not going to believe that somebody would go through these lengths to hide it. You need evidence. And I'm not talking about court, because the truth is, in criminal court, I do believe you need evidence. I'm not saying that any person of any gender should be able to walk into a criminal courtroom and say, Joe abused me, and then just have the guy go to jail. Like that's crazy, of course. But we're not even looking at the evidence. We're actually just saying like, it's not enough. You have a video, but it's not enough because you should never have taken the video, right? Like you breached his privacy by having the video. It's crazy.
It does happen. It happens all the time.
It's mental.
It's maddening. It makes no sense. I think people are, as a whole, I think have a real ignorance to what abuse is, the cyclical nature of abuse, the really nefarious, kind of insidious things that go on in abusive relationships. Because a lot of times the argument is like, well, why did she stay? Or why didn't she talk? Or why didn't she this? Again, never focusing on the man who did the action, but always the woman's reaction to the action. Like we're always flipping the narrative. I talk about it on my page a lot, is like, no. Stay with me. Stay on the man for a second, because I will bring up things that men do. And quickly in my comment section, people will jump on trying to make the woman look bad or bring up something in her, like, well, what about this thing? And it's like, wait, why are we so quick to leave the perpetrator? Why are we instantly on the victim about this, that, and the third? And I just think it's very concerning that people don't take the time to look at it, because unless you really do the research or have experienced it, which a lot of women, just even statistically looking, have experienced some type of abuse in their lives from usually an intimate partner. And it's like, it is never just like the person getting caught is almost like it's never that one instance. Like when someone gets caught, like it's almost, I can't even think of a time that has happened where the first time they're abusive in any way, their girlfriend, their partner is taking them to court, right? It's usually a last straw. It's usually when it gets too bad. It's usually when it's public or someone else calls, And so it's like there is always this long stretch of abuse before that moment. And additionally, I think they don't take into account the good, like the way they get you, the love bombing nature a lot in these abusive situations, because that is why people stay. They are desperately waiting for that good guy that they knew to come back, the one that they see little hints of. And it's like, until you understand the depth and breadth of like abuse and what it does to people and even their psyches. Like it can rewire your brain and your nervous system eventually, like how you perceive the world. Until we understand that, we're going to keep doing this silly game of like, well, what about this? And why didn't you just leave? If I was there, it's like, no, you wouldn't though. Like, no, you would not. If you did the full gambit of how this went, I do not believe. And also it's irrelevant. It is irrelevant
Yes.
what you think you would do in your
Yes.
imagination.
Yes. You know what it reminds me of? Talking to my 9-year-old when we're talking about things like safety. And I'm like,
Yeah.
if someone comes up to you and is like, hey, I have a puppy and I've lost it. Can you come help me? And they try to grab you. My 9-year-old is like, I would kick him in the legs. I would run. I would get away. I would punch him. I would listen,
Right.
man, you'd be thrown in a van so quickly, right? You've no
To
idea
tell you.
because he's 9 and he's not
Yeah.
ready to fully understand like the nervous system and trauma responses and what would happen if you are actually afraid for your life and how you might behave differently. But people always picture this extreme, like a man has a weapon to your throat kind of situation. But no, like what if you just live with this man and he just conditions you over time to feel a constant baseline of fear. And then you're in a fawn response all the time and you don't even recognize that he's abusive. You think you'd leave when your sister is like, really, Steve? He's so nice, and your mom is sort of like, I don't know, divorce is a big step and you're Christian and you think you're going to burn in hell if you get divorced and all of these factors. You think that you could just decide to just not feel any of those things? That's crazy to me. So I can't take people like that seriously. It's like talking to a child.
I think it is. I think it also is people want to feel safe. People want to think that would never happen to me. They want to believe they couldn't be manipulated. It's like this air of superiority, but it also is this need to like feel safe. Like, oh, I know I'm good. That couldn't happen to me. And I often think people don't recognize like how egotistical like that is and how that is and how not based in reality it is. Like you are so desperate to feel safe, you are unwilling to look at this situation. Like you are centering yourself in this horrific situation for someone else. If your immediate thought was, well, it wouldn't be me, couldn't be me. It's like, that is bad. That is very self-centered that you look at someone else's pain and center self. I also think that, the nature of the way that you're abused with these men, like you don't always know you're being abused because they have convinced you it's your fault. So even if something bad is happening to you, like you can recognize, like even getting hit, but like the smaller scale, like someone cheats or someone raises their voice or someone, makes you feel unsafe or all these things happen, multiple types of abuse. When you talk to the women, if they're not like out of it or they haven't healed, they will often say, yeah, but I did blank. But I knew he was in a bad mood and I just kept going at him. They will regurgitate his language. They will just literally be the puppet of what this man says to them. And it's like, they don't even recognize they're being abused half the time. They think they're the problem. They think they're lucky to be with this man because they're so horrible. He has abused them mentally to the point they think they're terrible people who deserve the worst. And, God bless this man who's willing to put up with their shit. And it's like, yeah. So that's why they say because some people are like, why years later? Why years later do these people come out? Sometimes it takes years to know you were being abused because of how much you were mentally manipulated into thinking it was your fault.
I'm actually a really good example of that, So I had 2 big abuse instances, physical abuse, I mean. I had all the abuse over a decade, but it got physical. And there was one that was particularly horrendous, which was a strangulation. And that did not click for me. The first physical abuse, we went from yelling to strangulation. Like we were arguing and then I was, back down, face up, looking at the ceiling with his hands wrapped around my throat in like 3 seconds flat. I've never been more shocked in my life. You'd think I would have done something in that point, but he was angry, he was drinking, he was sorry, even though he never apologized. Crazy, right? Nothing happened again for 18 months, but when something did happen, it was a violent assault. I was thrown up a staircase, dragged into the kitchen, had my head bashed in like 30 times. So you'd think I'd call the police, right? This is twice. Like, what the hell? This is obviously a pattern. But because of the space between the two, to me, they were unrelated. completely disconnect. I still didn't catch like this is abuse. Obviously, I knew that was bad. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't see it as something that we couldn't overcome somehow. And I know it's crazy. And trust me, I've said this story and people are like, what the hell? Like, I would never. Shut your face, right? Everybody makes the decisions that they make. But my point is, that happened in October. I called the police in July. And the biggest question from his family and his friends was, yeah, what made you wait 9 months, huh? Why'd you wait? Any normal person would have called right away. No, any normal person who felt like it was something that this person would regret, if I called the police that night, he would have gone to jail. And I didn't want him to go to jail. I felt bad. So it's crazy because I'm supposed to not call the police, right, to protect him. And many people would even agree with that, even though that's crazy. I absolutely should have. But when I call the police, nobody's going to support me and tell me I made it up anyway. So, and the police won't really be able to do anything because we were alone, he denied it, and there were no witnesses. And shockingly, I wasn't bleeding. So what would that have done me? But either way, I waited 9 months. And actually, the answer to why is because during that 9 months, there was other physical abuse, but it was, I'm going to say smaller. Like, I don't mean to make it sound like it wasn't as important, but it was waking me up in the middle of the night and dragging me out of bed by my feet, and I would just boom to the ground. Obviously, that's abuse, but he didn't beat me. So it was like, maybe things are getting better. But it took a therapist to say to me, like, you are in danger. This is so worse. What are you not getting? You know, she was so polite about it, but like, come on. And it had to do with my kids. There was a risk of me losing my kids because I wasn't protecting them. So that's ultimately what made me call 9 months later. But when you just tell the story of he assaulted her and then 9 months later she called, you're missing some context and some nuance that really matters. So it could look like because I waited, it was false. And also because I waited, there was no bruise. There was no evidence. And again, we were alone. The only witness was a 3-year-old. And that's not going to be someone they put on the stand. So prove it. And that's the worst thing, because even if you call the night it happens, a lot of women take back their story. In fact, I once interviewed a retired lieutenant, Mark Wynn. We did an episode of the podcast together, and he was actually describing that in his experience, when you get called to a domestic as a police officer and the victim, whether someone else called or she called, if there is an alleged situation, if she is like, no, but I deserved it, or he didn't mean it, or I fell, and you can see something, the fact that she's taking it back is not a sign that anyone lied. It's a trauma response. Actually, to him, it's a sign that something happened and the police need to stay.
Yeah, I've heard similar things. One, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's awful. Yeah, I don't think that's crazy at all, honestly. Like, I think the one thing that people miss entirely, I feel like with these situations, is like the cognitive dissonance of the abrupt violence. So you have someone, and maybe they're shitty, maybe at least you feel like you know the range of their behaviors, perhaps. And then they just wham, do something, and then it's over. And I feel like for so many women, like the dissonance between what just happened, how did that happen, like what, like it's easy with these men to often just go ignore it or like push it aside because it's so violent, it's so aggressive, it's so quick that you literally can move on. And half the times these men won't acknowledge what they've done. They won't talk about it. I had things happen where he would, do something horrible and then in the next breath would act like it never happened. And your brain goes, what just happened? And you go, I don't, and it's so hard to comprehend that you do just move on because you're like, you don't want it to be either. You don't want that to have happened. And so that's what they know this. Abusive men have learned this. They have patterns of behavior. And then to your point, you had that horrific thing happen and then you have the smaller scale thing. So in the back of your mind, you are like, well, maybe it is a little better. Maybe he is getting a little better. It's such a mind F. It is so confusing. You're in a constant state of fight or flight. Your brain isn't working correctly. Like your brain is not functioning. And so you're doing your best in the moment. And so it's like, yeah, when something so abrupt and huge happens, but then goes away, it is easy to be like, okay, I guess, but maybe it'll be okay. Or like, maybe that was a one-time thing, or maybe he's sorry, to your point. Maybe he is sorry, even though he never says it. Maybe deep down, I know he is. Like, there's just so much that goes into it that people, they just don't want to acknowledge. They don't want to think it can happen to them. it's this horrible cycle of people don't want to acknowledge it, and then people don't want to talk about it because people don't acknowledge it and people don't have good responses. And then people will say, well, I don't even think that stuff goes on. It's like, it's in so many houses. It's happening everywhere. You probably know someone right now where it's going on in their life. And it's just the lack of empathy for the sake of, misogyny, and also for self-preservation, that again, that sense of I'm safe, that won't happen to me, is really astounding to me. And I think people need to do better understanding it so that they can recognize it too. Because people have been saved by somebody recognizing something and being an ally to them in that time.
Yeah. You called it egotistical, and I totally agree with you. I also see it as arrogance, right? That whole you're looking down on someone, sort of like, I would never let a man treat me like that.
Yeah.
I used to think I would never let a man treat me like that. You don't really, you just have no idea what it's like when the conditioning is happening, as we've described. So it happens to anybody. There's no how do you make sure this never happens to you? You have to listen to your body cues and be incredibly secure and know things and have the right support systems and the right environment and everything. And even then, you could still be dating someone who's abusive or marry someone who's abusive. There's so many factors. Now, this whole kind of point of false allegations, one thing that really irks me so badly is that there are false allegations, right? Statistics show about 2%, something that I have been looking at a lot over the years. And obviously because of my work, I want to know what are the numbers and be able to speak intelligently to them. And what I found interesting is that stat of 2 to 10% is sort of the accepted number. And people want to focus on that so badly when some of what men call false allegations are, he wasn't proven guilty. And so not guilty is not innocent. And men really seem to hate that. What the hell? Again, I'm not suggesting that someone could just say something happened and then somebody goes to jail. I'm not saying that. But what we know is that police mishandling, missing evidence, not guilty, all of these things can make people say it. But true, actual false allegations, experts who really study this say that it's 2 or less percent. But it's still 2%. So let's just use those little 2% of women who truly just make that up for bad reasons. I am so angry at those women because they get held up like props, right? See, she lied. And that means that any of you could be lying, which I find really ironic, right? Because one man hurt me, therefore it could be any of you. That's not fair. But one woman lied, it could be any of you. That's totally rational and fair.
Yeah, I think it is a very strong indicator of the privilege that's going on. It's a similar thing, if a white person does something, it's just seen as an action that they've done, and it's not specifically, well, white, they're all white people do this. But, a person of color, often if they do something bad, it's looked as a reflection of all people of color, right? And it's used then, to your point, well, here's that example, here's that one example. And it's just a use of privilege. I am wholeheartedly against false accusations by any person. I think it's horrific. But I also think that people weaponizing that is also insane. All genders can do anything. We're all capable of being liars. We're all capable of being manipulators, weaponizing the system. Everyone has the potential of doing that, right? But it's interesting how we take a small percentage of something and then say, well, this is what happens. Just women and false accusations, when there's no data to prove that. You're weaponizing one piece of data and ignoring 99% of it. You're taking a 1%, you're ignoring 99%, which shows me this is not about that. This is not about the data. This is about, you have a belief system that you want to back up in some way, and you're using this against it because the data doesn't support the viewpoint, but you want to talk data. It just doesn't make any sense. And so I think it's just privilege. It's just misogyny. It's such a small number to bring up. You are more likely as a man to be assaulted than you are to have a false accusation. And that's serious. Men shouldn't be assaulted either. No one should be assaulted. But they don't want to talk about, a lot of men don't want to talk about that either. That conversation is not comfortable, seemingly, for men when I've tried to have conversations online about it. And I think it's just, I think people have a viewpoint and they're weaponizing a piece of data. I have a strong distaste for women who do that, but I also think it's insane that those isolated few people are then used and weaponized against all women. I think that's crazy because it's clearly like you were looking for something to use. That is what you're using, but clearly you had that viewpoint because if that wasn't the case, you'd be using all the other data that's out there.
If you like sources, then let's talk about that. If you like facts, let's do it, right? Let's play this game, but they don't. I also find too, in my experience, the amount of men that are like, cite your source in my comment section. Listen, dude, I would cite a source if I didn't think you were actually going to just take that source and immediately discredit it. Because it's interesting how I could quote, I don't know, like a Harvard study, and you'd be like, yeah, but what, right? Yeah, but the study was conducted by a woman, or yeah, but it was conducted by a man who's a feminist, or yeah, but here's another study. And then they proceed to quote like a men's rights activist infographic that was made based on a study that some idiot completely misunderstood on purpose. Like there's the statistics that they throw around. I'm like, are you out of your mind? You're not on Earth.
Well, a lot of times they're misquoting studies. Happens all the time. I have. There was a psychiatrist that I have had problems with personality, but he blatantly misquoted a study in a video. Like he completely misrepresented. I found the study, completely misrepresented it. He said, "Oh God, what was this?" I'd have to look it up, but basically, it was a study of women reporting men, and he basically was like saying I think he said there was like a 20% chance if you're a guy, a woman's going to report you to the police or an authority if you approach her. Approach being the key word. The study was talking about how many women had to report men for being inappropriate. And I called it out. I made a whole video on it. He wouldn't take the video down. He wouldn't address it. And he called me a rage baiter. This was like a public person. And it's like, not even like, in the comments, which is, they're all doing that. But it's like, okay, so when you misrepresent a study, I can show you how it's misrepresented. I can tell you why that's dangerous. You can keep it up. It's like this is another part of this. They have no repercussions for saying false things. Like there's so many times in arguments with men online that misogynistic men, to be clear, that they'll just throw stuff out. I can say, this is wrong. This is not right. And they'll just keep going, keep cruising. Whereas women, it's like, we have to name 5 sources for everything we say. It's crazy.
Yeah. And what's interesting is if you do produce 5, they'll produce 1 that is not even true. And then you're just discredited, which really is a logical fallacy, which only proves they are intentionally trying to misrepresent things. If these men actually cared so much about falsehoods, including false allegations, then they wouldn't be spewing false studies and misinterpreting things and making shit up.
Yes, if you're
care so much.
If you're against falsehoods, why are you saying made up shit in my comment section? Doesn't make any sense. It's just serving their own narrative. I've come to terms with the fact that it's about the narrative. It is whatever they are trying to prove to themselves, like whatever helps them sleep at night, whatever makes them feel better about themselves, like. And, it's really upsetting when it's coming to false accusations because, like, there's data, there's personal anecdote, like, you could see so many women's stories online. Like, in this day and age, we have access to so many things. And the fact that we're still trying to spew this narrative when, like, how many women get justice, even if they have proof, even if they go through the court system? It is so rare for there to actually be true justice for women. But we want to talk about false accusations. I'd be much more willing to have these conversations once like real assaults are taken care of. Like once we are really on that, I think that could be more of a conversation. But if you're looking at a very small percentage of false accusations versus all the assaults happening to women that don't get justice, if the thing that upsets you with those 2 things, real women's trauma and then like a guy in a false accusation, if that's what upsets you more, then that's a you problem because the pain, the harm done is not even close. It's not even, it's upsetting because like, well, what about this? I'm like, let's look at the grand scale. Like what is
you don't care
more
about
dire?
The right things. You care about the wrong thing. Now, again, false allegations matter, right?
Sure.
Nobody should be doing it. But it's funny when they're like, but they're ruining lives. Name a life that it ruined. Just one. I'll wait. Go ahead and name one.
Yeah.
Because all I see is case after case after case. And I made a video actually semi-recently about this concept of like, naming people like Chris Brown, just as a perfect example.
Right.
I named a few people and several others. And it was like, yeah, but you're naming celebrities. Name everyday people. How? Okay, first of all, if I named everyday people, you couldn't look them up. So then you would tell me I made up the names.
Right.
But also, whose life did it ruin? Like, I know people. No, you don't. Because what's interesting is if they're using the 2% statistic, which is factually accurate, and if people don't agree, you can not agree with a fact. You become wrong, right? Because a fact is a fact. But that would mean then that out of 100 people who have been accused of something, 2 false accusations, 98% happened. So if a man says, I was falsely accused, my brain goes, ooh, there's a 98% chance that he did it. So, and it's funny, ex-patriarch, he has an account that's incredible. People should absolutely follow him. He said, and I have the same experience, when men are in our comment sections being like, no, but I'm a victim of false allegations. Look up my case. You'll see it. Look. And you actually look, he did it. It's the guys with restraining orders and the guys with histories of domestic violence that are screaming that they didn't do it. And here is the irony of when he says he didn't do it, we're like, well, we need evidence. So obviously he didn't do it, innocent until proven guilty, even though we're not talking about court. And when she says that he did it, we're immediately like, no, she needs evidence, she needs sources, she needs proof, she needs blood. And even then, he's probably going to get away with community service or probation at best. But typically, nothing happens. So we sit here and we say to women, get out of these relationships and prosecute and do something. And then as soon as you step forward and do something, we're going to call you a liar and you're not going to win in criminal court. And then if you go to civil court, you're a gold digger. And if you go to family court, you're just trying to get custody. It's like you lose. You're a woman, you lose. Welcome to the patriarchy.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the other thing is like with these men is I think their misogyny and their lack of seeing women as human beings, literally, makes them not think that it is abuse. And I know that they know they're harming women, but I think they have the right to harm women in certain ways because you can talk to men about consent. You can be like, okay, so your partner does not want to sleep with you. And you know that. Do you keep pushing? How far will you push? How far will you go? Will you beg and barter? Would you sleep with your partner if you knew they weren't into it and they didn't want to sleep with you? Do you know how many men say yes? Like there's a real conversation to be had about consent. What is consent? What does it look like? And so many men will say, well, consent, they'll say, well, it was consensual. And you're like, okay, what was consent to you? And it's like, well, she went on the date with me. She got the drink. She came to my house. What'd she expect was going to happen? Like, what did she and you're like, oh, so you don't think you did it, but that's because you don't see her as a human. You see her as an object that you've already bought. Well, I paid for it. I paid for whatever it is. The drink means I get sex. Or like, again, like we don't have to talk about this right now, but I've made so many videos about like what consent is and like how often men are like, don't care about like if a woman is wanting to do it or not. As long as like there's not a physical altercation to stop it, they'll say it was consensual.
But that's kind of the point, right? So when a man is like, oh, it's a false allegation,
right?
I know. And honestly, people might say it's bias, and I'm not even going to defend whether it is or it isn't. But the point is, I get it. When people say he did something, my brain is like, he says he didn't, but like, does he understand consent? Does he know what that means? Because, does he think he's just delivering what's justified? Because in my study of abuse, which is my full-time thing, what I often see is men saying, but, and then they explain why she deserved it. Like, for example, when he threw me up the staircase, it's because I said no to sex that night. And even then, right, some people are like, whoa, that's terrible. But some people are like, okay, that's terrible. But let me ask you this. How many times did you say no? Because maybe he was just at his wit's end. Okay, so when you say no to a man a certain number of times, and it's a number that you'll never know, by the way, at some point you will be thrown up a staircase. Again, are men inherently violent? I don't think so. But the men telling me that I deserved it, you seem to think that men are inherently violent and that we should all avoid them. So all I know is when women are making these accusations, there is no real benefit. Money is not a benefit. Status is not a benefit. Attention, we've determined it's very negative attention the vast majority of the time. Evidence doesn't seem to satisfy people. And so all of this just becomes women are lying. And I know it's because of misogyny and because we're living in a patriarchy. Like, there's no prize for disclosing abuse. There really isn't.
I mean, there's literally legal ramifications for it. I mean, again, that's why people get confused. It's like, it's a court of law. So like, I could have had actual abuse happen to me. I was present for the abuse, obviously. I know it happened, but I didn't record it, and I have to prove it. You could have been abused and not be able to prove it because it's video, it's bruises. Like, you may not have these things. Even if you have bruises, you can't necessarily prove where they came from. It's like, if you don't have that, you could lose. You could know in your heart of hearts you've been abused, and you can't prove it. And they'll win. That's what happens. And so it's just like, I don't know. It's so frustrating when you talk about abuse, because it's like, no, like, bad things can happen to women for telling the truth. So often they're quiet. You just have to look at the statistics. I'm 100% with you when you talked about like the 2% versus the 98. Statistically speaking, if someone tells you there's a false accusation, like, I'm the other way. Whereas these people are saying like, oh, if you say there's an accusation, I don't believe you. If I hear there was a false accusation, statistically speaking, that would be rare. That would be unlikely. So just if that's your reaction, it makes sense because you're actually going with data. You're actually looking at it like without emotion. You're logically assessing.
Logically. I just want to be clear that the women are looking at this with logic and the men are looking at it with emotion. And what
100%.
is so ironic about statistics and all this stuff too is that, like, what splitting doubles in a blackjack game means. What odds are a certain team is going to win, and men bet with all these odds. You understand statistics and numbers and placing bets. You'd place a bet that if a woman accuses, like, knowing the statistics, you'd place an actual bet, put your money where your mouth is. Bet $5,000. But there has to be a way, of course, to prove that, which is the whole friggin' point, that often they're doing it behind closed doors. You know what's weird about that is it's almost like abusive men don't want to get caught.
What? Like, they're sitting, it's almost like they use other people as their shields and their alibis.
Yeah.
And can I just say this really quickly? The other thing is this, when men are like, was never mean to me. It's like, yeah, because you're not the gender that he thinks he's better than. You're not the gender he thinks he can abuse and get away with it. Like, that's what it is. Like, of course, he sees you as a human. He sees you as a peer. He's not going to do the things. He also probably knows he might get his ass beat if he acts like that towards men. There's a reason that these men target women, like, and isolate them and do it in private. You're the alibi. And that's the thing I wish people would get is, like, there's so many people who don't realize they're facilitating abuse. Because they're the ones that are like, I don't think so. He's such a nice guy. It's like, you better be really very sure of yourself if you are defending someone when an abuse accusation comes up, because that is the nature of abuse. They don't abuse everybody. If they were outright abusive all the time, they wouldn't have friends.
100%.
They would be like a sociopath. Like, you know what I mean? There'd be someone, they'd be antisocial. Like, the point is there are people that like them. And so, like, I urge people, if you hear something, do your due diligence with that before you defend anybody, because, like, it's so often, like, I have known good people that have defended predators and then later found out and they're like, oh shit.
Yep.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost like you could have bet. Almost like there was some way you could have known.
98%.
Yeah. I remember once talking to an 18-year-old and he was telling me how his girlfriend broke up with him. And I was like, oh my God, that's too bad. What happened? And he was like, she accused me of being abusive. And I have to admit, I had to keep my chill in that moment, but I was like, ah! So I was like, oh, that's strange. What exactly, what did she say? I was trying to be on his side. And he described abuse. He just didn't use the word. He was explaining the way that he had to control her because, and I'm like, so you're abusive. Like, that's, so again, it just proves that, like, he didn't see it that way. And to be fair, I didn't convince him of it, nor did I even try. But they don't see it as abuse if they think that they're justified in what they do. And so men who are screaming false allegations are probably the ones with the restraining orders and the DV histories. So the message is, believe women. The message is
Yes.
believe victims. False allegations are in fact rare, and there are no benefits for women to bring this up. We are ostracized from so many areas of our lives and held accountable in ways that men just never are. So it's a rough go for women, but thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Anytime. I love it. I love talking with you.
I watch your content all the time. So where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me. You can listen to my podcast across all the different ones. It's a Buckle Up Babes podcast. You can find me on TikTok, which is Buckle Up Babes. I think F the Nice Guy is still my username, but you'll find me either way. And then Reagan Reacts is my YouTube page where I react to different things. So that's
Absolutely
me.
love it. Please go follow her. And thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you again.
Of course. All right, perfect. Thank you.